I'm Brad Wilder, and this is Wake Up Canada News. Another costly and failing year under Justin Trudeau's government. Canadians demand better and deserve better going into 2025 as Justin Trudeau's leadership struggles continue as Prime Minister of Canada. Over and over again for the past 9 years, nothing but trouble. Plus, we'll take a look at the economic and social outlook we're headed toward in the year ahead. And do not comply makes a return as bird flu now makes an appearance just in time to mess with the change in presidency and a Canadian election ahead, hopefully. There's a lot more to come right after this.
At the Cork and Flame, we're always cooking and ready with the finest for all our customers any time of day or night. From breakfast brunch to lunch and dinner, steak and seafood to ribs and more. The Cork and Flame Fine Dining. Always fresh, with fabulous desserts and a narration of the urban landscape, plus a passion for quality food. Eat, drink, chill. Cork and Flame, 3106 Portage Avenue. There's no hurry, so sit back and relax.
Welcome back. Since assuming the role of Prime Minister of Canada back in 2015, Justin Trudeau, leader of the Liberal Party, has faced numerous challenges that have raised questions about his leadership and his effectiveness in managing the country. While he began his tenure with an optimistic vision of progressive politics and social reform, several key issues have contributed to his perceptions of this leadership faltering. Now, here are some of the factors that, have shaped the narrative of Justin Trudeau's failures as Prime Minister. And there's been a few, to say the least. Now there's the ethics scandals. That's number one. One of the most significant factors tarnishing Trudeau's reputation is his involvement in multiple ethics scandals. The most notable of these was the SNC Lavalin affair, which emerged in early 2019. The controversy centered on allegations that Trudeau and his office pressured former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould to intervene in a criminal prosecution against the Quebec-based engineering firm SNC Lavalin. Now, the firm was facing charges of bribery and corruption related to contracts in Libya. The scandal led to the resignation of Wilson-Raybould and another cabinet minister, Jane Philippot, which further damaged Trudeau's image and integrity. The ethics commissioner later found that Trudeau had violated the Conflict of Interest Act by attempting to influence the legal proceedings, though he denied any wrongdoing at the time. Now, this event raised concerns about the Prime Minister's commitment to ethical standards and even transparency. Now, number two, there was the handling of the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic was one of the most, challenging BS crises to face any government. And while Trudeau's government introduced a range of support measures such as the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, and the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, some critics argue his handling of the pandemic was inconsistent and slow. As the pandemic unfolded, Canadians experienced difficulties with testing, vaccine rollout, and border controls, areas in which Trudeau's government was criticized for being unprepared or ineffective. In particular, the vaccine distribution was initially slow, and the federal government's reliance on provincial leadership for much of the pandemic response led to confusion and frustration among citizens, to say the least. The government's promise of a strong economic recovery after the pandemic was also put into question as Canada faces rising debt, inflation, and a labor shortage that is yet to be fully addressed. Economic mismanagement and inflation, as Trudeau's handling of the Canadian economy has come under scrutiny, as high inflation reached a 40-year high back in 2022 and 23, and now even higher again in 24. Affecting the cost of living for many Canadians. It's been a tough few years, to say the least. Say that a lot on this show, it seems, today. The Prime Minister is being criticized for his government's excessive spending during the pandemic, which has contributed to inflation and increased the national debt. While stimulus spending was necessary during the early stages of the pandemic, critics argued that the government's continued fiscal approach, including a series of debt deficit budgets, may have fueled economic instability. Despite promises to return a balanced budget, Canada's fiscal situation worsened under Trudeau's leadership. Critics argue that Trudeau's politics lack a clear long-term vision for sustainable growth and that his economic policies disproportionately benefit urban areas while leaving rural communities behind. Now, the next thing was his failure housing crisis. Canadian housing affordability had reached critical levels during the Trudeau tenure. As house prices surged in major cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, young Canadians and first-time homebuyers found themselves increasingly locked out of the housing market. Trudeau's government has made efforts to address the issue through initiatives such as first-time homebuyers incentive and increased funding for affordable housing, but critics argue that these measures have not been sufficient to curb the rapid rise in housing prices. Many see Trudeau's housing policies as piecemeal and insufficient, with a lack of coordination between federal and provincial levels of government. There's a general sense that the government has not prioritized real solutions to the affordability crisis, leaving many Canadians feeling abandoned. And number 5 under Trudeau, divisive politics and loss of support. Trudeau's leadership style is also being criticized for being divisive. His attempts to balance the needs of various interest groups and regions have often fallen short. His handling of the 2022 Freedom Convoy protests, for example, left many Canadians frustrated. Initially, his government appeared to dismiss the protest as fringe elements. When the protest escalated, Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act, a highly controversial decision that many believe was an overreach of executive power and further deepened political divisions. Additionally, his handling of the national unity issues, particularly with Alberta and Western Canada, has been criticized as well. His carbon pricing policies intend to combat climate change were seen by many in resource-rich provinces as harmful to their economies, exacerbating tensions between the federal government and these provinces. And number 6, Indigenous relations and unmet promises. Trudeau campaigned on a promise to mend relations with Indigenous communities, but his track record is being criticized by many Indigenous leaders. While his government made symbolic gestures such as apologizing for the residential school system, implementing a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women, and funding Indigenous-led education programs, progress has been slow. Indigenous communities continue to face high levels of poverty, inadequate health care, and poor living conditions. The promise to address the 60s scoop and to fully implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action remains a work in progress. Critics argue that while Trudeau's rhetoric had been progressive, the real-world impact for Indigenous peoples has been limited. Plus, there's a declining popularity and lack of trust in Justin. As recent polling suggests, Trudeau's approval ratings have fallen significantly, reflecting widespread dissatisfaction with his leadership. Many Canadians feel that Trudeau has failed to deliver the key promises, that his policies have not effectively addressed their concerns. As trust in his government erodes, the political landscape in Canada has become more polarized. With the rise of opposition leaders like Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party, many see Trudeau's leadership as increasingly ineffective, especially as the 2025 federal election looms closer. Critics argue that his time in office has been marked by a series of missteps and failures that have undermined his credibility and ability to govern effectively. In conclusion, Justin Trudeau entered office with a strong mandate back in 2015, but his time as Prime Minister has been marked by a series of ethical controversies, economic challenges, and social issues. His government has been marred by mismanagement and unfulfilled promises. As the nation faces economic and political uncertainties, many Canadians are questioning whether Trudeau is the right leader to navigate the future challenges of the country, and the answer is no, after the last 9-year track record. Now let's take a look at the future of Canada in 2025 under the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, assuming current policies and trajectories are maintained. They can be analyzed from both economic and social perspectives. Now here's a breakdown of possible scenarios based on current trends. An economic outlook in 2025 includes inflation and the cost of living, of course. Canada's inflation rate, which spiked in recent years due to the global pandemic and supply chain disruptions, could continue to exert pressure on the cost of living for every Canadian. If inflation remains high or volatile, many Canadians could face challenges in housing affordability, grocery costs, and general living expenses. The government's approach to controlling inflation, including interest rate hikes by the Bank of Canada, will significantly impact household budgets and consumer confidence. In 2025, Canada could see more advancements in green energy infrastructure, electric vehicle adoption, and the expansion of clean tech sectors. However, the challenge will be balancing environmental policies with the interests of Alberta and other provinces reliant on oil and gas, which could generate social and political tensions. Also in 2025, Canada could experience a more stable post-pandemic economy, but recovery in sectors like tourism, hospitality, and small business may still lag behind. There's a possibility of increased public debt, which could lead to fiscal tightening in the midterm. With the labor market, Canada may see increased demand for skilled workers, particularly in sectors like healthcare, technology, and clean energy. With Trudeau's government prioritizing diversity and inclusion, there may be a focus on addressing labor shortages by encouraging immigration and ensuring a more inclusive workforce, which is something we don't need. With rising property prices in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, the situation could worsen for first-time homebuyers even more. Now the healthcare system, the future of Canada's healthcare, remains the key issue, of course, for everybody. As the population ages, pressures on the system will continue with demands for long-term care, mental health services, and affordable prescriptions. Doesn't matter whether you're liberal or progressive conservative. Canada's political landscape under Trudeau is marked by increasing polarization, especially issues like climate change, economic recovery, and housing affordability become more contentious, along with immigration. Conservative opposition will challenge Trudeau's policies, particularly around carbon taxes and fiscal policies. Trudeau's government may need to enact stronger regulations around technology companies to protect citizens' rights, particularly as the digital divide between urban and rural areas might widen. 2025, under Justin Trudeau's government, Canada will continue to face a complex and unpromising future. Economic failure continues as challenges such as inflation, housing affordability, and fiscal sustainability will require careful management, something this government doesn't understand one bit. Socially, the country could see further lack of progress in areas of healthcare, and regional disparities will continue to persist. Trudeau's legacy will never be forgotten or forgiven, and Canada will likely remain an attractive destination for immigrants while navigating the challenges that come with growth and poverty all in one. Thanks for nothing, Trudeau, you POS. Now on to Pandemic 2.0 possibly. It is difficult to predict the exact timing and nature of the next pandemic, including whether it will be caused by avian influenza or bird flu. However, there are several important factors to consider when thinking about the potential for a future pandemic related to bird flu. It's already started. Current threat of bird flu, particularly the H5N1 and H5N8 strains, have been a cause for concern over the past few decades. While the virus primarily affects birds, it has occasionally infected humans, leading to concerns about potential human pandemic. However, human-to-human transmission of bird flu remains rare. The World Health Organization monitors outbreaks of bird flu, but so far these have been sporadic and limited to certain regions. I wonder which regions. You can look it up. You'll find out. Mutations and adaptation for bird flu to cause a pandemic, the virus would need to mutate in a way that allows it to spread easily between humans. This is what happened with the 2009 H1N1 swine flu pandemic, where a virus that had been circulating in pigs evolved to infect humans more efficiently. Scientists constantly monitor bird flu for signs of mutations that might make it more dangerous to humans all day long. But under global surveillance and preparedness, there's an increased global surveillance for emerging infectious diseases, and pandemic preparedness has significantly improved since the SARS, MERS, and COVID-19 pandemics. These systems help detect potential threats earlier and mitigate the spread of diseases. The response to a potential bird flu pandemic would likely be faster than previous pandemics due to improved public health infrastructure, meaning we know how to send the shit around now. Other potential threats: while bird flu is a potential candidate for the next pandemic, there are other viruses that could also pose a risk. Bill Gates is on top of all of that, of course, along with people like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Tam here in Canada. Coronaviruses, for example, have demonstrated the ability to cause widespread pandemics, and there are concerns about other influenza strains or even completely new pathogens emerging in the future. In conclusion, while bird flu H5N1 or another strain remains a potential threat, there is no certainty that it will be the cause of the next pandemic in 2025, even though they're leading you to that, final conclusion. Monitoring, preparedness, and global cooperation are essential, they say, to minimize the risks of such events. And finally, will bird flu require human vaccinations? The possibility of bird flu avian influenza requiring human vaccination depends on a lot of factors, including the evolution of the virus, the ability of humans to be infected. But a breakdown of why human vaccinations might be needed? Well, Bill Gates will say, current situation, most bird flu strains primarily affect birds, but occasionally they can affect humans, especially those with close contact with infected poultry. Some of the more concerning strains, such as H5N1 and H7N9, haven't even heard of that, but it's caused human outbreaks, though these are relatively rare. Mutation and transmission: if a bird flu virus were to mutate and acquire the ability to spread easily between humans, it could pose a significant public health risk. In that case, vaccination against the new strain would be critical to prevent a potential pandemic. Like I said at the beginning, do not comply. Vaccine development: researchers have already developed vaccines for certain bird flu strains like H5N1, which have been stockpiled in case of a more widespread outbreak, so they're already prepared for this. However, these vaccinations are specific to the strain and may not be effective against a new or mutated virus. Continuous monitoring and vaccine development are crucial, they say, to stay ahead of the potential threats. Just like before, right, Bill? Yeah. Current human immunity. Most humans do not have immunity to avian influenza viruses, which is why vaccines would be necessary, they say, if these strains start circulating widely among people. Unlike seasonal flu, where vaccines are adjusted yearly based on circulating strains, a new or highly mutated bird flu strain could require a completely new vaccine formulation. So no end in sight, just what they ordered. But there's one thing that I've got to ask. They don't mention death at all from this. Yet we all need to be vaccinated. Something else is going on. You're going to have to help figure it out. It's going to take all of us. Public health and preparedness. The World Health Organization, the WHO, and other public health bodies continually monitor bird flu outbreaks and have contingency plans for vaccine distribution in case of a major human threat. Oh, I bet they do. Last time, it was called genetic experiment, just to use a catchphrase. In summary, while human vaccinations are not currently required for bird flu in most cases, the need for a vaccine could arise if the virus mutates in a way that allows for easier human-to-human transmission. Or, well, they need to fill their pockets again. In such a scenario, rapid vaccine development and distribution would be essential, they say. Sure, they've got it all planned out, 100%. Well, there it is, a look at the past and some of what's to come in the present and the future. From all of us here at Wake Up Canada News, that's me, myself, and I, we wish you the very best in 2025. Please like, share, follow us on YouTube, Rumble, X, and even BitChute. And remember, you're the voice. It's time to make it count. I'll see you soon.